I'm here today to announce that a grand jury has returned an indictment against Kermit Siebert, date of birth November 2nd, 1977. Mr. Siebert has been indicted on 2 counts of criminal sexual assault and 1 count of unlawful restraint. Criminal sexual assault is a Class 1 felony that carries 4 to 15 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, followed by 3 years of mandatory supervised release. Unlawful restraint is a Class 4 felony that carries 1 to 3 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, followed by 1 year mandatory supervised release. These charges are merely allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent until or unless proven guilty in a court of law. These charges stem from an incident that occurred December 13th, 2018, where the Rockford police officers responded to St. Anthony's Hospital. They spoke with a victim who reported that she had been sexually assaulted by an unknown male. At that time, they conducted an investigation. During the investigation, Kermit Siebert was developed as a suspect, and charges were subsequently authorized. I want to just recognize the hard work of the men and women in the Rockford Police Department that work in the Sensitive Crimes Unit, who conducted this investigation and who were able to develop Mr. Siebert as a suspect, and were able to subsequently reach out to our victim who was sexually assaulted. I also just want to share with you some statistics on sexual violence. Sexual violence is very common. According to the Center for Disease Control, more than 1 in 3 women experience sexual violence in their lifetime. In addition, according to the Center for Disease Control, nearly 1 in 4 men experience sexual violence in their lifetime. Sexual violence also starts early in a person's life. According to the Center for Disease Control, 1 in 3 female victims reported being raped between the age of 11 and 17, and 1 in 8 reported that this occurred before the age of 10. 1 in 4 males reported being raped between the age of 11 and 17, and 1 in 4 males reported that this occurred before the age of 10. So what I want to do is to let the public know that sexual assault crimes are not age specific, they are not gender specific, and they can happen to anyone. As a community, we need to recognize and remove the stigma, the shame, and the victim blame, so that we can have individuals who commit these crimes brought to justice, and in addition, encourage those who have been victims of sexual assault to come forward so that we can make sure that there are no future victims of the offender. If you believe that you have been a victim of sexual violence, or you know someone who has, displaying on the screen are several numbers, including the national hotline numbers where you can call for assistance. The calls are confidential, and you will receive information to help you navigate this experience. In addition, we have the Rockford sexual assault number on the screen as well, and they are available to assist victims who have been sexually assaulted, to provide them with appropriate counseling, and to provide them with resources that can help them navigate through the process. When a victim has been sexually assaulted, the trauma can remain with them throughout their lifetime. We do know that several victims experience post-traumatic stress. It affects them mentally, it affects them physically. And so what I want to make sure that the community understands is that we need to support those who have been victims of sexual assault, and I want the victims to know that it is never your fault. You know, this is a crime of violence, it's not a sexual crime, but sexual assault is a violent crime. And if you have been a victim, law enforcement is here to investigate, and we are here to provide resources and to make sure that the perpetrator is brought to justice where the evidence exists. At this time, I would like to ask Chief O'Shea to step forward to say a few words.
Good morning. You know, we often talk about violent crime in Rockford, and it usually involves shootings and murders and domestic violence. This is a different type of violent crime we're talking about today. No less horrific than shootings and murders, sometimes even more horrific in certain circumstances where they don't even know their offender. And what the state's attorney said about carrying this for a long time, this is a very affecting crime on people's mental status, and post-traumatic stress for these victims goes a long, long time in their lives. Super credit to the victim in this particular case, but any sex assault case, for following through. Talk about a strong-willed woman to stand up and come back and willing to face her attacker and make sure that justice is served. Can't say enough about the strength and courage of the victim in this case and in all these sex assault cases. The Family Peace Center, RACE, will be here to assist anybody if anyone is a victim of crimes, and we hope to keep prosecuting the sex assault offenders. But that's kind of the message we got. It's another type of violent crime, and it's no less horrific. So if there are victims out there, please reach out to us. The detectives will work on these cases. This is 2+ years old, and they continue to work on them. They do a great job, but we need the victims to come forward. So thank you.
I would also just add that a warrant was issued for Mr. Siebert. He is currently lodged in the Brown County Jail in Wisconsin on a $500,000 bond, which is our warrant. He also has unrelated charges in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm happy to take any questions that we're able to answer.
Can you tell us more about where this attack took place and how old the victim is or was at the time?
I can tell you that the attack occurred at a location near a hotel in the city of Rockford, and the victim was a visitor. She did not know her attacker, so this was a stranger.
She was a visitor at the hotel, or a guest at the hotel? Or?
Yes.
Okay. How old is the victim, or was the victim at the time?
The victim is an adult, so you will have access to the indictment, which, as you know, we do not, for privacy's sake, indicate the victim's name, but there will be a date of birth and initials in the indictment.
Chief, the focus on really trying to help stop domestic violence, sexual violence, has been something that's been a very prominent topic in the city of Rockford for really the past couple of years, certainly since I've been here. And as you described, the strength of this victim to actually, combat some of this, what do you see that as the chief of police, seeing a little bit more pushback from people that are potentially victims of this?
We're pleased with the way the direction's going of victims of sex assault being more forthcoming, and the assistance that's being provided to them from various agencies. I think that helps. It helps them get through not only the incident but all the after effects of the incident. And there's difference between a stranger sexual assault and a domestic violence or a known offender sexual assault mentally. I'm not saying either one of them's easy or easier by any means, but they're different types of crimes, and the victims are going to react differently. So for us as the police, we're encouraged and keep encouraging people to come forward and talk to us and provide information. But we're very happy that we have partners not only with the state's attorney's office, but with RACE and with the Family Peace Center coming online to provide services to these people to help them through not just the criminal process, but all the mental process and the after effects of their lives. So we're encouraged with the direction it's going, but there's just too much violence overall, but sexual violence as well here in Rockford. So we keep working for it.
Marilyn, do you know where Mr. Siebert lives, where he resides?
I believe that he does reside in the state of Wisconsin. And I would also just like to echo what Chief O'Shea said. You know, I think the more the community removes the stigma of being a victim of sexual assault, that does embolden more victims to come forward and to say, this happened to me, you know, it shouldn't have happened to me, it was not my fault, and it's never the victim's fault when they are sexually assaulted. So I think that has also, or would also continue to increase victims coming forward, and as you said, having the courage to come forward and make sure that their attacker is held accountable.
For a victim who is considering coming forward but is kind of worried just about the general anonymity and not the anonymous aspect of it, can you just kind of walk through the certain steps of the anonymity, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
To make sure that they're not identified, to kind of quell those fears they might have?
Yes, so thank you for the question. When a sexual assault victim comes forward, again, we have sensitive crime units with the local police agencies. So these investigators are trained to work with victims of sexual violence, and they are required to have so many hours of this training by state legislation. And also, we do not print their names in any public documents or the indictment. Sometimes we use Jane Doe. Most of the time we use the initials and their date of birth. In addition, the press is not allowed to film these victims and not allowed to print their names in the newspaper. So we do everything that we can to shield them from being publicized with their names and their photographs, and we have the courts that also assist with that. Also, RSAC, the Rockford Sexual Assault Council, has excellent counselors who actually come to court with victims of sexual violence. They will come to every court appearance. They will also communicate with those victims in between court appearances to make sure they are receiving the services that they need. But as I indicated, it's a very traumatic experience, and sometimes victims of sexual assault do not understand that they are victims. Sometimes at the beginning of the prosecution, they don't want their abuser prosecuted. And as they are able to navigate through counseling, they then realize that, you know, especially for the younger victims, that this wasn't consensual, that they were abused, and then they actually are able to move to that next level of getting assistance psychologically and mentally for the trauma that they have experienced.
And you stated that the care goes far beyond just the arrest and indictment of the suspect in this case. What kind of steps are taken to make sure after the arrest and everything is over, to make sure that they are okay and they're not slipping into some kind of mental downturn?
Well, like I said, they are offered counseling services, and again, that's private. No one can have access to their counseling information because of the privilege, and the RSAC counselors are there to direct and guide them through that. So if they need counseling, they're able to get that. If there is an incident involving the workplace where they need time from work, you know, we certainly can assist with that without specifically stating what the offense is. We can certainly send letters when they are required to be in court, you know, that they were a victim of a crime. It's all very generic. And so we don't want victims of violent crimes concerned, you know, about the embarrassment or about their livelihood in their workplace. We will work with them. The RSAC counselors and our victim service providers on other types of crimes will work with them to make sure that they understand the criminal process and that they're able to navigate it. And we are there with them throughout the process, even after it ends. We are able to continue to communicate with them and to provide information regarding resources.
Can I make one comment? Also, I think it's important, victims of sex assault need to know that right after this is about power. This has nothing to do with sex. This is power and control. physical and mental over the victims. But what we really need is if someone is a victim of a sexual assault, we need them to try and go to a hospital as soon as possible, and they can complete the sexual assault kit at the hospital. They have trained nurses to collect evidence, and the evidence under state laws, we don't even have to log their name with the evidence. It can be logged in under their initials or anonymous, but at least we have the evidence going forward. So maybe they don't feel strong enough to come forward and talk to the police or a counselor at that time, but if we have the evidence collected and we can deal with the case months down the road, years down the road, at least we have the evidence of what occurred. So we encourage people to make sure they understand that, and kind of going off what the state's attorney said, we'll help them through the process. We have male detectives, female detectives, every race, we will make people feel as comfortable as possible talking with whoever they're speaking with, whether it be a counselor or a detective. But we really need them to come forward, and we'll be there to support them.
And as a follow-up, Chief, how vital is it to have that victim evidence, that victim testimony, to get a result like in today's case?
Well, obviously, physical evidence is always one of the strongest we can have in court proceedings or for law enforcement, for prosecution. But there's eyewitnesses, there's other physical evidence, there's testimony, there's video, there's a lot of things that we use. But as much evidence as we can garner to put into a case, it obviously helps with prosecution down the road. So, any evidence is good evidence. Physical evidence is extremely strong.
And I would just add to what the chief said is sometimes victims aren't sure that they are victims, and what I want to let them know is if anyone has sexually assaulted you without your consent, you were in fact a victim. And I don't want victims second guessing that. I want them, as the chief said, to get a medical examination right away, because that preserves evidence going forward. And often we do have victims that report sexual assault, but they are not ready to go forward. And the state of Illinois basically allows us an unlimited statute of limitations to bring those charges. And so as long as the evidence is collected early on, we can work with victims, help them get through counseling until they are ready to go forward. We will never force a victim until they are ready to proceed, because that would be, in effect, re-traumatizing the victim. And oftentimes, as I said, we have victims come forward and they say they are just not ready to face the public, as you indicated earlier, the press, the stigma. And so they are able to have that time, and I want them to know that, because the state of Illinois has expanded the statute of limitations, and basically there pretty much is no statute of limitations currently on prosecuting these types of cases, and we will do that.